That was actually really satisfying. Hey everyone, I'm Jens Anso. You are in my shop and today it's all about sharpening. I'm gonna talk a lot about my Toco. I'm gonna put on first secondary bevel as a knife maker, and later on we'll talk about how you as an end user can maintain that edge all the way from sharpening and stropping to a full-on recreation of the secondary bevel. Take a look.
So Jens, why the Toco? Why are we talking about the Toco?
The Toco is my latest project out of the shop. The Toco is my shop build folder number 2, and so far I've sharpened about 200 of these, and it's just my favorite design to date. I believe that the Toco is my very best work. If you haven't seen anything about the Toco up until now, that must mean you don't follow this channel, and shame on you. Go follow, and we created a full documentary about the creation of the Toco. The Toco is a medium-sized folder or medium to large folder. It's an 85mm blade or 3.5 or 3.25 inch blade, which is the general popular size for everyday carry folders. There's smaller, there's bigger, but this actually gives you a very good reference to a decent sized knife and how you should take care of the edge on your knife. As I said, this is my favorite design, and I just happen to have an unsharpened knife here that we can discuss. So this knife is straight from the assembly table. This has an unsharpened blade. You have the blade bevel established, you have the finish, everything is done. And the very last thing that we do in the Anso shop is put the final edge on it. This is the primary bevel, and here we will create the secondary bevel. Right now, the blade thickness, which will be the blade thickness right behind the edge, is 0.3 millimeter. That is very thin. It's a hollow ground blade. Putting on the secondary bevel will make the knife sharp. The next process takes place behind the belt grinder. This is super nerdy stuff. This is what I spent the last 25 years perfecting. This is freehand sharpening on a belt grinder. This is not something you do in your own home or shop unless you are professional. It actually tells you a lot on what goes behind every single knife that leaves the shop. So I put on the secondary bevel on a belt grinder. That creates a lot of dust, and I don't want the dust to get into the bearing system and mechanism, so I want to mask off the critical areas. Let me do that. For this process I use masking tape. This is the type of masking tape that you remove without leaving any residue, which is quite important. So I mask off the front of the blade, in front of the handle, so I'm actually creating a seal against the handle here. And just for good measures, I'm actually putting a little piece of tape on top of the button here, because it's critical that you don't get dust in with the button lock here. A good quality masking tape will take care of just that. And it's easy to apply. It doesn't leave any residue on the knife that I have to clean off afterwards. Some knife makers will just blow it clean with air. Some will sharpen the blade before assembly. All what you will hear in this video is how I do it in my shop. And mind you, every time you talk about sharpening, you're actually talking about kind of religion. This is something there's so many opinions about. So I will probably say something that you don't agree on, and that's perfectly fine. And if you want to argue, please, let's argue in the comments below. I'm just going to tell you what works for me and what has worked for me for the past 25 years. And what works with the steel that I use and with the grinds that I use and all that. And results will vary. If you have a different steel, you need different techniques. But what I'm going to show you today is what has worked for me for 25 years. This takes so much control and is usually something that I do early in the day with the phone on mute, with some boring podcast just summing in my ears, and with the door closed, sometimes even locked, because if I'm not in full zen and full control of myself, this is where you can really make a lot of poor decisions. This is where you can ruin a perfectly good knife in a matter of seconds. So it's something that I don't really enjoy putting on camera because there's the potentiality of huge failure, but let's see what I can get out of my many years of experience. So if you noticed, I actually put my finger up against the grinding wheel, and this is so I establish a repeatable angle between the grinding wheel and the blade. This is something that has taken me a very long time to master, and even so, after sharpening, I would estimate about 5,000 knives throughout my career. Even though I've sharpened that many blades freehand on a belt like this, I still manage to screw it up every now and again. So it requires fully attention. So the tape protects my fingers, and I put the finger up against the wheel, and that finger rests the blade, where I aim for an approximately 18 degrees angle. And how can I know it's 18 degrees? Well, it's from the many years of experience, and that I check now and again with a sharpening fixture just to see how well do I maintain that angle. So now I established the secondary bevel on each side. The two bevels meet, and where they meet there's a small burr that you can actually see in the light on the blade, and that is what I'm looking for. I look for the burr in the full length of the blade so that I know that the full length of the blade has the secondary bevel that is needed for the next process. Now that I created the secondary bevel on the belt grinder, actually stops the process where you need very high training. The next steps I actually developed so that you as an end user can copy my techniques one-to-one. Because I actually consider every last one of the knives that I send out as tools first and foremost. I also understand that some of the knives that I make, especially on the custom side, are very pricey, and I also understand that some of them will never be used. Nonetheless, every single knife that I make is capable of being a tool, and as of such, I want the end user to be able to maintain the edge of that tool in the same fashion that I create the edge. So now that the secondary bevel has been created, I actually moved to a quite simple tool, but a tool that I love. This is the Spyderco Sharp Maker, and I've been using the Spyderco Sharp Maker for something like 24 years by now. This is the second one that I bought. But the first one I sharpened several thousand knives on that one. And the only reason why I bought a new one was the base of the old one had a crack in it. And I didn't like it, but it still functioned. So right out of the box, this is a great sharpening set and a great set for maintaining the bevel or the edge of your favorite pocket knife. It doesn't necessarily need to be one of mine, but this works for so many different knives. What I like to do is, out of the box, it comes with a medium stone and a fine stone. I found that the fine stone is not quite fine enough for my personal taste, so I went and bought the ultra fine stone. And that is actually what I use to put the final edge on every single knife that comes out of the Anso shop. One of the reasons why I really like using the Sharp Maker is that when I bought my first one, it was something like $45. I just checked the price and retail is $127. Still, it's very accessible for just about any knife nut out there. It features a base that will fit the stone in a triangle, either at 40 degrees or 30 degrees. And mind you, the 40 degrees is the total angle. And when I said that I was aiming for 18 degrees, it's per side, so 36 degrees on the belt grinder. But I actually used the 40 degrees setup here to set the final edge. And its only purpose is really to remove the burr and polish the very, very tiny outer limit of the secondary bevel. It's such a simple technique that anybody can master it, and this is one of the reasons why I chose to do this, because every single one of my customers are able to do exactly this. The only thing you have to do is hold the knife vertically and while holding the same angle, just move from rod to rod. And I put a medium amount of pressure against the ceramic rods. Now I removed the burr, I polished the edge with the ceramic stone, and now I want to move ahead and do a stropping of the edge. This puts the last finish on the edge. This is a strop that was given to me by a maker called Griffin, and this is basically just a piece of wood with a piece of leather on it and some green polishing compound. And what you want to do is pull away from the edge. By doing so, you're polishing the edge and creating a much finer tooth edge on the blade. Before testing the sharpness of the blade, I want to remove the tape and clean the blade of any of the polishing compound and grit from the belt grinder and all that, just to make sure that the next step doesn't create any scratches in the blade. Now, my go-to sharpness test is just a piece of paper. So what I'm aiming for is actually test the full edge with the paper. And the wonderful thing about the paper test is if there's a small nick in the blade, I will know for sure. It also tells me if I did the stropping well enough, or if we need to take it all the way back to the ceramic stones and repeat some steps there. It tells all I need to know if this knife is sharp or not. So I will start the cut all the way at the heel and run it slowly across the edge. And I do this a couple of times. Again, this is religion for a lot of you guys out there, and I've heard some people say, well, cutting paper will dull the knife. I think cutting paper is what most of our knives are doing anyway, so if it's dulling the knife, yeah, I don't really buy that. Eventually, of course it will, but cutting anything will dull your knife. But this actually tells me that I have a very usable edge and it's evenly sharp across the blade. This knife would be ready to send out to you as a customer. But I also like to just talk a little about why I chose the bevel angle that I did. I chose approximately 18 degrees. It might be 17, it might be 19, and it might vary from knife to knife. This is a hand-controlled process, and of course I'm not a robot, so it will vary from knife to knife that I make. But the 18 degrees angle is very close to the 20 degrees angle on the Sharp Maker. That is one reason. I believe that between 18 to 20 degrees creates a very strong edge. And again, what I build is tools meant to be used daily. I don't want a knife that needs sharpening every time I cut up a box. The 18 degrees angle will give me a very strong edge. And mind you, this is also to do about which steel that is used in the knife in question. This is RWL34. It's a stainless steel high alloy. It's a steel that I've been using for roughly 25, 27 years by now. And I absolutely love it. Is there steels out there that can get sharper? Yes. Is there steels out there that is more rust resistant? Certainly. Is there steels out there that will hold the edge longer? Yes. But what you have to understand, and one of the reasons why I don't necessarily buy into all the new steel hype, one steel is great one day, but the next day it's crap. I don't buy into that. I know how to probably use this steel, how to have it heat treated, how to sharpen it, how thick the edge needs to be, and all that. So I think a lot of that comes into play as well. The angle of 18 degrees on this particular steel gives me a very strong edge. If I wanted a sharper knife than it is now, and I can easily get that, I would create a much steeper secondary bevel, maybe 15 degrees or even smaller. That will create a super sharp edge. It will also create an edge that is a little more fragile. The intended use that I have with my tools, I feel that I get the best of both worlds with creating this particular angle. The process that we're discussing here is actually where you're taking a lump of steel and titanium and making it into a knife. This is the single most important feature in a knife. If the knife is not sharp, what is it? It's just an uncomfortable lump of materials in your pocket. So this is also where I believe you are separating yourself from the professional and the hobbyist. This is where you can tell if the maker has taken the proper care. Could I spend more time on the edge? Most certainly, but I also have to say that the edge that I create on these blades is a super good edge. It's a long-lasting edge, and it is one that can be repeated and maintained in years to come. I could spend an hour or several hours on each knife to create a mirror polished edge if that was my intent, but that is not what I need. I need a serviceable working edge. Now, if your knife was dull enough that it requires a little more work than you can actually accomplish on a Sharp Maker, and it actually needs to be quite dull for you not to be able to do this. After investigating what was on the market and asking in my Facebook group, the Anso Collective, and on my Facebook page and Instagram page, and just listening to what you guys like and use, I went with the TSProf KO3 Pro Hunter set. This is not an inexpensive set by any means, but I wanted what I considered to be the very best on the market. Is there anything else that is better? Probably so, and if you think so, let me know in the comment. But this is what I went with. And before we start working with this, mind you that this is a brand new set for me. I don't have any experience using it. I've used it only once before this video. So once I get to learn how to use this properly, I will gain some experience, but I'm still using all the years of experience I have as a knife maker when I judged the result that this is making. So first I want to do is just prepare the flats of the blade with some masking tape so I don't put scratches on it. And I'm also actually preparing the plunge here of the blade so I don't put scratches into the plunge area here. Now, the Toko has a very defined flat area on the blade right here. Not all blades have that, so in order for you to clamp the blade very precise, you need to be very focused around the flat area of the blade. If it doesn't have any flat areas, it might actually be a good idea to take the knife apart and sharpen the blade without the handle attached. The TSProf comes with a lot of different types of clamps, and I'm just using the one that I intuitively found to be the one that would fit my need the best. I will experiment with them and see. What you need to understand is once you start using a system like that, you're actually reprofiling the secondary bevel. Regardless of how little or how much you are reprofiling the work that the maker or factory put on the edge. That is a given. I've seen a lot of questions online asking, okay, what bevel angle is that or that knife? And it's very easy to determine, but I'll show you that in a second. Now the blade is clamped up, and I have to tell you that one thing that terrifies me more than anything is putting a sharp blade in a vise, because once it's here, it's a slicing machine that will just cut everything that you put near it. So just word of advice, don't leave your workstation with the knife sitting here without at least putting some kind of protective cover above the knife. Ask me why I know this is dangerous. Now I want to establish exactly what angle that I want to sharpen this knife at. I think that I set the secondary bevel approximately 18-19 degrees on the belt grinder in order for me to determine a plain old Sharpie along the edge of the blade. I'm just going to cover the secondary bevel. Now I covered the edge in ink. I'm going to put on my optivisors and then carefully inspect what I'm doing here. I put on a 600 grit stone. That might not be my go-to choice. It's probably going to be coarse enough to do what I needed to do. I have the angle set at around 19 degrees. There's a small scale here for reference. This actually has a digital readout. I haven't really figured that out yet, but if we put it on the edge, it says 16.6 and it's not zeroed out, but I need to figure that out. In the end, it doesn't really matter exactly what angle it is. What matters most is the consistency of the edge. Now with the 600 grit stone, I'm just gonna do a very careful sweep on the edge and just see where it removes material. It actually removes material a little high up on the edge, which is fine. But now I can see exactly where it removes the ink. So out here, it's actually quite close to where it's set. So I want to decide that I'm going to keep it at this angle and just profile it or reprofile the secondary bevel to be a uniform angle across the edge. And I also understand that as you move across the length of the edge, the angle will change depending on where the stone is moving. But the important thing here is not the specific angle, but the consistency of what I'm doing now. So now with the 600 grit stone, I'll see how it works for me, and I'm going to reprofile the secondary edge on this side. And that was side 1. That took what, 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Even though that I determined the angle, the ink actually tells me if I've removed all of the initial secondary bevel and that I reprofiled the entire secondary bevel.
Jens, from a scale from 1 to 10, how satisfying is this?
Actually, it's surprisingly satisfying, like super satisfying, and I get it. I understand why you guys are raving about sharpening with fixtures, because for me, sharpening freehand on the belt grinder and then going to the Spyderco Sharp Maker, it's just part of my job. This is something where I can definitely see myself nerding out completely, one knife at a time. But doing it in a production manner, in a production environment, it doesn't really make much sense. I can see myself adding this to some of my custom knives for sure, but for production scales where I might sharpen 10 knives in a day, that's just part of my routine. This is not the right tool for it, but it's certainly satisfying. Now, if I was a super patient guy, I have 8 different steps of stones here. I could go with each and one of them. I don't really see the point in doing that, so I'm gonna skip some steps and just move upwards. But let's just move to 1,000 grit stone here. And what we're doing now is really more polishing of that bevel we just established with the 600 stone. And I'm sure there's techniques for doing that. One could be that you only work in one direction with one stone and in the other direction with the other stone, and then you get a pretty decent idea of what you're doing. Now the majority of the work is done. So I moved all the way up to a 10,000 grit stone, and I have to say this is super satisfying. I've never tried sharpening a 10,000 grit stone before, and what's appearing is actually a almost mirror-like finish on the blade, and it's super satisfying to look at. And that is what the consistency of using a system will give you. Can you do this freehand on sharpening stone? Yes, you can. If you are very, very skilled and you spend what the average 10,000 hours perfecting a skill, you can't call yourself a professional until you've done that. While I consider myself to be a professional knife maker per definition, I'm not a professional sharpener because I don't have 10,000 hours in it. And our work on the system should be done. Haven't tested it in any way. And I just realized that I need one more thing for this setup to be complete, and that is, I know you can get a strop for this system as well, and I didn't get a strop. And when you're sharpening with a 10,000 grit stone, is a strop even necessary? And what grit is the green compound? I don't know. But let's just test it on a piece of paper. I'm just gonna remove the blade and clean it, and then test it on a piece of paper and see if stropping is needed or if stropping will make a difference. Testing sharpness with your thumb is actually not a very good test of sharpness, but it gives me some idea of what's going on. If the blade will catch your finger, it's pretty decent sharp. Just I think I can benefit a little from a little stropping. Let's see. I know that green rouge is a compound that you can use when mirror polishing, so that's at least something to be said about the fineness of the green rouge. And I can see that the result on the near mirror polished edge actually improves by doing this.
It reflects in the camera, Jens. That looks insane.
Definitely an improvement on the edge. No spots on the edge that needs work. Huh. That was actually really, really satisfying. On that satisfying note, that ends this episode of sharpening. If I can sharpen a knife like this with the setup straight out of the box, you can as well. If you have any questions for me, suggestions, or like to tell me how many things I did wrong in this video, let me know in the comments. And remember, the Turco is available for order right now. You might even be lucky to find some for immediate delivery, or you can customize and set up your own Turco. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, do so right now. Leave a comment. I will answer every and all comments. And until next time, see you later.